Hello, I hope you're well wherever you are. My name is Judith. In this video, we're going to look at the basic procurement rules. Also, as part of my introduction, I am the convener of the study challenge for the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015. So the basic procurement rules are found in Part 7, and they're covered from Section 70 to 89. We're going to start with Section 70. Section 70 is about the standard tender documents. And the standard tender documents are provided by PPRA, as we had discussed in Section 57. And these standard tender documents, you download from PPRA, then you're able to customize it. There are sections which you touch and there are some which you don't touch. You only edit or modify those sections which allow you to explicitly describe your procurement needs. So a procuring entity which does not use the standard tender documents commits an offense. There's that temptation to use what you previously used. Like RFQ, previously we used to have a form that when they gave us the new standard tender documents, it is like a booklet. There's that temptation to go back and use the form, but please note that it's an offense. So appraise yourself with the new RFQ document and start using it as soon as you can. The other thing I would love to say under the standard tender document is that the accounting officer has been vested that responsibility to prepare the standard tender document, but of course, he delegates it to you as the procurement practitioner as you work along with the user departments. A procuring entity may provide this document for free or may charge a small fee which only covers the cost of printing. But if the bidders are advised to download the document from a website or a particular portal, then it should be issued for free. Just for noting is that the tender document must have sufficient information to allow fair competition among those people who intend to participate in the bidding process. Under subsection 6 of section 70, you've been given a list of things which your tender document must contain. So familiarize yourself with those so that at any given time, you can counter-check your tender document against the checklist that has been provided there. Next, I would like to talk about registration of suppliers. This we also covered in section 57, where the head of procurement is expected to maintain a list of registered suppliers. We are told that application to be registered is continuous, but for inclusion into a list, you can do that periodically as prescribed. So potential suppliers can go into, say, your website, if it is enabled to have that capacity, and submit their documents there. They can walk into your office, into your entity's office, and drop their applications there. And then you will take them and assess them for the eligibility criteria as guided by the Act and the regulations. And if they meet that, then they are registered to supply goods based on the category for which they have applied for. So you can also do a market survey. You're allowed to do a market survey for, say, categories where you don't have a list. You conduct a market survey, establish who is there, then you invite them to participate in the bidding. You're also allowed to borrow a registered list from another public entity, as long as that list was arrived through a competitive and a fair process. One thing to note also is that these lists of registration of suppliers, they are used in the alternative procurement methods. The default procurement method for public procurement is open tender, but there are scenarios where it is not cost effective or time effective to go open tender. Then in that scenario, you've been given alternative methods, like, for example, requests for quotations. Then there is restricted tendering, among others. So in such scenarios is where now you use these lists to invite people to participate in that particular tender. The next thing I would like us to look at under basic procurement rules is the responsibility to comply to the Act. Besides the procurement practitioners and anyone who is involved in the procurement process, contractors, suppliers, consultants are also expected to comply to the provisions of this Act that touch on them. Then, initiation of the procurement process, that is under Section 73. This is done by user departments, and they must ensure that whatever they are requisitioning is in their procurement plans. And for something to be in the procurement plans, of course, it has to be in the budget, and a sufficient budget has been provided for it. Then invitation to tenders. Now, once the procurement department has received the requisition, which is the outcome, or which is the document that is generated at the point of initiation for procurement, and they go ahead and now prepare an invitation to tender where you invite bidders to participate in this tender. So depending on the method of procurement that you're using, you will customize your invitation to tender appropriately. If it's open tender, the invitation is different from, say, request for quotations. So you have been guided under Section 74. What should go into the invitation to tender? Of course, the invitation to tender goes together with your tender document, and it should have the name and address of the procuring entity, tender number assigned to that procurement proceeding by the PE, a description of the goods or services being sought, an explanation on how to obtain the tender document, including any amount to be paid, if any, among other things. So go to Section 74 and you will be guided on what needs to be in the invitation to tender. Good. So once you have given this invitation to tender to bidders or potential bidders, can you modify it? Yes, you can. In the event that you realize maybe it had an error, or it was missing some information, or you want to expound, if it is your specifications or terms of reference, it is okay to go ahead and modify your tender document. And this modification is what is called an addendum. So what happens here is that all those people who you invited, if you used the alternative methods like RFQ and restricted tendering or direct procurement, all those people you invited must be informed of the modification that has been done. If you did an open tender, then of course you have to place an advert through the means which you advertise the tender, and also in your website, informing them of the thing, of the aspect that you have modified. On the other hand, when you are doing these amendments, they can be done at any given time before the deadline for submission, as long as it is not altering the substance of the original tender. If it completely alters the substance of the original tender, it can qualify for a termination of procurement, so that you rework on the tender documents and call and invite people afresh. But if it is not substantially affecting or changing the material of the original tender, then you can modify it at any given time. But in a scenario where you only have a third of the period remaining, then it is prudent, or it is fair that in such scenarios, you extend the deadline for submission so that bidders have sufficient time to make modifications to their bids. How does modification arise? I've said it before. As a PE, you may realize that you made an error, you made an omission, and so you need to make a change. Or it may arise from inquiries that have been made by bidders, and hence your response requires some modification. Good. I think anything else I haven't covered, now you can refer to the section. Good. Now, if a bidder has already submitted their bid, can they modify it? Yes, they can. Under Section 76, you have been guided that they can, as long as they do it in writing, they do it before the deadline, and they do it in a manner that it meets the requirements of submission of the previous tender of the same tender as advised. So the change or withdrawal shall be in writing. Change or withdrawal shall be submitted before deadline and in accordance to the procedures for submitting tenders. If a bidder wants to change after the deadline has elapsed, that is not permitted. That is not permitted. The next thing I want us to look at is Section 77 on submission and receipt of tenders. So bidders, they submit on the deadline. They submit as per the procedures that have been given in the tender document. If it was to the tender box, they've been given the place, the location, that is the location and the time. They've been advised on how the envelopes should be sealed, if it is one envelope, if it is two envelopes. So submission is to be done as per the requirements or as per the procedure that has been prescribed in the tender document. So submission of tender documents, whether in electronic or manual form, shall be in writing, signed, and in the case of manual submission, they must be sealed in an envelope. In an envelope in which it is sealed shall bear the tender number assigned to the procurement or as a disposal proceedings by the procuring entity. A tenderer shall submit before the deadline for submission, and any tender submitted after the deadline shall not be accepted. And it goes on and on where the tender box should be placed. Then you've been guided if a tender document is opened before tender opening, what should happen? You've been guided. You've been guided also under Section 7 of Section 77 that if a bid document is too big that it can't fit into a tender box, what should happen? Read subsection 7. It should be recorded and it should be acknowledged to have been received by the PE. Then we go to Section 78 about opening of tenders, tender opening. Tender opening is done on the time, location, as per the instructions given in the tender document. And it should be done by a tender opening committee that has been appointed by the accounting officer. Note that it should be an ad hoc committee, not a standing committee. And it should have at least a minimum of 3 people, including the chair. And please note that at least one person who was involved in tender opening must not be in tender evaluation. So the committee shall have at least 3 members. At least one person of the members shall not be directly involved in the processing. Any bid withdrawn in writing shall not be eligible for evaluation and consideration. Immediately after the deadline for submission of tenders, the tender opening committee shall open all tenders received before the deadline. Then those submitting tenders or their representatives may attend. It's not mandatory, but they may attend the tender opening. Then the tender opening committee shall assign an identification number for each tender and record the number of pages received. Then you've been given further details on subsection 6, subsection 7, 8, and 9, keeping of records and registers which have to be signed by everybody who is in the tender opening committee. They prepare, subsection 10 is the one talking about preparation of tender opening committee minutes. So take note of that. To acknowledge, subsection 11, to acknowledge that the minutes are true reflection of the proceedings held, each member of the tender opening committee shall initial each page of the minutes, append his or her signature. Yeah. And then if you lose, any person who causes the physical loss of tender documents provided under this section commits an offense. So I believe you went through that. You can read it again. And remember, as I've said before, you can always refer to the regulations if you need more clarification on these sections of the Act. Section 79 now talks about evaluation of tenders. Sorry, talking about responsiveness of tenders. And please take note of that. Then we go to section 80, evaluation of tenders. The evaluation of tenders shall be done by the evaluation committee, which is also ad hoc and is appointed by the accounting officer. And they shall use the evaluation criteria which was in the tender document. Go through section 80 and you will get more details about that. You should not go changing the criteria, introducing new criteria. It will be construed to lock out other people, and that is unfair. The evaluation committee shall prepare an evaluation report making recommendations about the evaluation. They can recommend who should be awarded, who should be dropped at any given point, and that they submit to head of procurement. Remember, previously, head of procurement was the secretary of the evaluation committee, but now with the revisions of 2022, the head of procurement may, in writing, nominate someone to be his representative, may nominate a competent officer who is also a procurement professional to represent him in the evaluation committee, so as a secretary. So the evaluation committee submits their report to the head of procurement, who looks at the report and also makes recommendations in form of a professional opinion that goes to the accounting officer, who then has that responsibility of either approving or rejecting the recommendations that have been given by the evaluation committee and the head of procurement. So I think more details are in section 80. Section 81 talks about clarifications. And this is a procuring entity may in writing request a clarification of a tender from a tenderer to assist in the evaluation and comparison of tenders. But this is done by the evaluation committee secretary, who is the procurement representative. But a clarification shall not change the terms of tender. Section 82 goes ahead and talks about correction of errors. Then we go to post-qualification. Post-qualification, let me read what the Act says. An evaluation committee may, after tender evaluation, prior to award of the tender, conduct due diligence and present a report in writing to confirm and verify qualifications of the tenderer. So it's more of verifying, doing a due diligence, which might mean you reach out to referees or you do a physical visit to the premises of the tenderer to verify the information that they gave you, so as to be sure of the person who you are awarding. Good. Then Section 84 talks about the professional opinion, which I've also mentioned about. The head of procurement gives a professional opinion to the accounting officer on the recommendations for the evaluation. The head of procurement function of a PE shall, alongside the report of the evaluation committee, a secretariat, comment, review of the tender evaluation, and provide a signed professional opinion to the accounting officer on the procurement or asset disposal proceedings. So if there are any dissenting opinions, the HOP, head of procurement, should also provide guidance on what should be done on the matter. So in making the decision to award a tenderer, the accounting officer shall take into account the views of the head of procurement in the signed professional opinion. So he's not bound to abide by that, but he shall take into account. So recommendation for contract awards, subject to the prescribed threshold, all tenders shall be evaluated by the evaluation committee of the PE for the purpose of making recommendations to the accounting officer through the HOP to inform decisions of award of contract to successful tenderers. So the outcome should be an award or failure to award if that is what the outcome will mean. So then we move to notification of intention to award. So if the accounting officer is okay with the recommendation to award that has been proposed by the evaluation committee and the head of procurement, and then he approves the professional opinion, then after that, then the person who is successful is notified that the PE intends to award them. So they are expected to accept that. But while this notification is being done, of course, the notification will talk about the amount which we intend to award at, and briefly on what the assignment would be all about and for what duration. If the successful tenderer is okay with that, he's expected to accept that acceptance within a period which shall have been mentioned in the tender document. At the same time, when you're giving the notification of intention to award, you're supposed to notify those firms which were not successful, and you will give them a reason as to why they were not successful, and you will cite who was successful, and you intend to award them at how much. Then after that, you will give a window period of 14 days so that if those who are not successful have an issue, are not okay with that decision, they can petition. They can raise a complaint within 14 days. Then if they don't, then now you're able to move ahead and get into contract with a successful bidder. So please take note of that. So the successful, section 86, the successful tenderer shall be the one who meets any one of the following as specified in the tender documents. So in your tender document, you must have the evaluation criteria. You must have what the successful tenderer must meet. And that is what has been highlighted in section 86. Section 86. And actually, there's usually a sample letter for notification of intention to award, or even a sample contract document that is included in the contract document. Good. So I've already talked about notification of the intention to award, which is now under section 87. The PE shall notify in writing the person submitting the successful tenderer that his tender has been accepted. But that should be before the expiry of the period during which tenders must remain valid. The successful bidder shall signify in writing the acceptance of the award within the time frame specified in the notification of award. When a person submitting the successful tenderer is notified, the accounting officer of the PE shall also notify in writing all other persons who submitted but were not successful. I've already said that. For greater certainty, a notification under subsection 1, that is a notification of intention to award, does not form a contract or reduce the validity period of the tender or tender security. So it's not that once a bidder has been notified, it's not that you've entered into a contract with them. Before expiry of the period during which tenderers remain valid, the accounting officer of a PE may extend that period. The accounting officer may give notice of extension under subsection 1 to each person who submitted a tender. So if they're running short of time, the PE through the accounting officer may request the bidder to extend their tender validity. And an extension of the tender validity shall not be more than 30 days and may only be done once. Good. For greater certainty, tender security shall be forfeited if a tender is withdrawn after a bidder has accepted the extension of bidding period under section 1. I think that is clear. Then section 89, it talks about international tendering and competition. Sometimes what you want to buy may not be locally available. In that case, you are allowed to spread your net wider as a procuring entity, and you're guided under section 89. If there will be no effective competition for procurement unless foreign tenderers participate, the following shall apply. You should do the following. Invitation of tender and tender documents shall be in English. Then the rest all the way to G. So I think that's all about the basic procurement rules. I hope you have learned something. Remember, learning continues. Continue relooking at these sections of the Act. Go to the regulation, get to know what more detail can you pick from the regulation. Otherwise, I wish you all the best. See you in the next video, where we're going to talk about classified procurement methods and procedures, and that is in part 8. See you there. Thank you.